This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Friday, October 28th edition of the DRF Players Podcast. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatale, back with you alongside the usual crew. From the DRF offices in New York, we have a sniffly Mike Hogan.
Hopefully not too sniffly. I blew my nose right before we went on, so
that's good.
Too much info for y'all.
Blew your nose before you blow our minds. That's the plan.
That's right. Exactly.
And from the planet Texas, I think he's in Texas. I think he's actually not traveling this weekend for once. Jonathon Kinchen.
No, I'm in Texas, getting ready to feel the private jet.
Ooh.
No, I'm kidding. I'll be riding standby just like normal to sunny California.
Middle seat smoking standby. I guess that joke doesn't work anymore. The middle seat smoking joke, because they don't let you smoke on airplanes, of course. But it's still
No.
how I envision any of my. I'm such a bad traveler. I just envision myself like cowering there, not big enough for the seat I'm sitting in. But
they do let you sit in the middle seat still, and they do allow people that do not understand the rules of airplanes to sit next to you. Look, just real quick before we move on, there's a rule on the airplane. If you get the middle seat, you get both armrests because you're already losing. The other guy can move as far as he wants to one direction. The other guy has the window space next to him. If you get the middle seat, you get both. So
fair to me.
Someone tweet that and pass it around. Some of these guys, they think they get both of them. It drives me insane.
It's one of those unwritten rules, like at the at the urinals, you never use the one next to someone else if there's others open, right?
Just common sense. It's just common sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I like to. I'm like a pack. I'm a herd animal, like a horse. I like to be next to people, so I always stand next to the people there.
You're violating the etiquette there, JK.
You're all about intimidation, anyway. I know.
But while we're talking about non-racing things, guys, I just had the most dizzying experience today. The reason we were meant to do the show at what's going to be the new live time going forward, which is 11 a.m. But Mike and Jonathon graciously accommodated my request to do it at the old time earlier because there's a Halloween party at Perrin's school today, and I didn't want to miss the Halloween party. What I didn't realize is, and maybe tell me if this is just like a weird Brooklyn thing or if this is everywhere, there are all these rules regarding Halloween and what you can bring and what you can't bring. And let me tell you guys, it makes no sense to me. Like, first of all, it's Halloween. If there's one day where you should be able to have candy, like, let it be that day. I get it if it has to be nut-free candy, but Halloween without candy, first of all, you're already on rocky footing with me. And then I'm looking at the list of some things that are allowed, like white chocolate or cupcakes. And I'm like, okay, so you can have all manner of sugar, just not in candy form. I just wasn't understanding the rules. And then my wife and I got the bright idea, we have this fun like Halloween-themed popcorn thing that we make. We'll bring the popcorn. Nope, not allowed. Choking hazard, apparently. First time I'd heard that one. And then just when I was feeling all put upon, we heard from another parent that at least we can call our Halloween party Halloween. Another school in Brooklyn we learned about, for some reason Halloween deemed too politically charged of a term, it's Character Day. Hey, Perrin, have a happy Character Day. Can you guys give me any insight? Am I going, is it me or is it them? Just tell me.
Brooklyn.
Okay.
Brooklyn. All Brooklyn except for one thing. I will say this about the popcorn, okay? When you are married to a pediatrician who has had to work in the pediatric ICU and seen a toddler who was fine 1 minute and then brain dead because they choked on popcorn, guaranteed your kid's not going to eat popcorn until they're like 20.
So no popcorn for Teddy, is that what you're saying?
No popcorn for Teddy, yeah. In fact, at Teddy's school, they were actually going to make popcorn a couple weeks ago, and Teddy came and said, "Can I eat popcorn tomorrow? Miss Debbie's going to make popcorn." And we had to politely say, we'll bring a separate snack for Teddy. Everybody else can eat popcorn. And they actually put it off until he was sick.
Oh, jeez.
So that he wouldn't feel left out. So
what's the story in Austin? Have you dealt with any of these rules, JK?
No, I mean, this is a pretty Brooklyn-ish city, if you know what I mean. But the only thing that I've got in trouble for is I did sneak an Oreo into his lunch one day, and I got caught. There was a note. There's a note. So whatever.
Peeing in the wrong urinal, bringing Oreos into school. You're just a scofflaw down there in Texas.
I'm a rule breaker.
All right, we got some real stuff to talk about today. I am glad to get that. That story makes me feel a little bit better, Mike. But I do want to get on to some stuff. Let's go back. Let's flash back to last weekend. Let's start off with a little bit of tournament talk. Jonathon, we talked about it on the pod on Tuesday. I wrote a whole article about it this week. Hopefully you were happy with how that came out. Sort of the anatomy of this wretched beat that you had, finishing in a dead heat for the sixth and final qualifying spot on DRF tournaments for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. It's 4 or 5 days later now. Simple question: are you over it?
Yeah. I mean, I'm over it. I get over stuff pretty easily. I mean, I think you kind of have to in this game, but it's just one of those. It's frustrating, like you kind of said in the article, and this is also not that I usually pay attention to ridiculous comments, but in the comments on the board, one guy was like, "Who cares? This is yeah." It's not so much about the fact that about me. It's the fact that in this game, like, we all have to learn lessons. And I think that a reason that you wanted to write the piece is because it was an opportunity for people to sit back and look at their game and realize things that could potentially be hazardous to their game. And I learned one that was potentially hazardous to me. I have to pay special attention when I'm in social situations, like at the track. I need to set aside a little bit more time and understand that the preparation might not be enough. There might need to be a little bit more attention to what's going on, and I'm going to be easily distracted. The second thing is that, it's really hard as horse players for us to control our attitudes. And I wish I would have said that when we were talking, but the reason I lost is because I lost control of my attitude. I couldn't stay in a positive frame of mind because I had a couple of negative things happen to me. I had 3 mistakes in that situation, and I could have still gotten a BCBC seat if I just would have let the first mistake be the only one.
Explain for folks who didn't read the article what those mistakes. So not that they should go read that article. They should post something negative about the negative commenter, or I could just have that removed and block them. But we'll do it the old-fashioned way. Go and you can say whether you like the article or not. But explain to folks what those mistakes were.
Well, the quick thing is that when I play tournaments, and I got this from your book when I first read your book, is that I put in at least something before the tournament starts in an all-in format, obviously, but even in a live format. I just put it in.
Default
in case my cell in case my cell doesn't work, the signal goes down in the Wi-Fi, I mean, whatever. I just want to have something there. Or if I get distracted, I want to make sure that I have picks in. So that was the first thing. What happened was that my good ticket became my second entry. So, when I put all of my plays in early, my second entry typically has my B style plays rather than my A style plays. And the mistake that I made was was on 2 races early, I did not switch my A style play to what had become my good ticket, which was my second entry. And if I would have done that, it wouldn't have been a tiebreaker. I would have won clear for fun. And not the whole thing, but I would have won the seat for fun. And so that's it. I mean, I made a mistake. And the reason that happened is one of them, I wasn't paying attention. And when I made a switch, I switched to the wrong one. The second one, I was mad about that. So I went for a walk and went to the far restroom to go stand next to someone at a urinal. And I didn't switch a 1-9 Baffert horse to my good ticket, which I would have normally done. And so it's just, like you said, it's an example for, I think what a lot of these things are. It's an example of how we can all do better and use other stories and people's stories to prevent us from making mistakes or turning $110 into 10,000, which, when you say it out loud, I might have relapsed a little bit. There might be another day of sadness, but it is what it is.
Well, and you said something else that I didn't have a chance to touch on in the article that I did want to talk about. I think a lot of contest players listening, they see a 1-9 Baffert, they say, well, I'm not going to play that horse. It can't really hurt me if it wins. Explain how your attitude is different than that.
My attitude is this. is obviously the most impactful version of the story. But I have lost, I don't know, 15 to 25 tournaments by less than $4. And if I can get a 1-9 shot who's going to gallop, and I'm going to get $4, whatever it is, $4.20 or $2.20 to win and $2.10 to place, I'm going to take that $4 because that $4 makes the difference. And this is a perfect example of it, where that $4 would have made this like a it wouldn't even we wouldn't be having a discussion. You know what I mean? So
you didn't need $4, you just needed 10 cents. And the one concept that I've never thought of it this way before until you were just explaining that, JK, but that reminds me of your normal betting day. And this is something that I just don't think a lot of players think about. And I do want to talk a little more tournaments before we move on to the Breeders' Cup. But this is a concept that I think we'll probably hit on later in this show and certainly next week when we're talking about how to spend money. The idea of preserving capital. Everybody wants to score. And there are some betting philosophies that really revolve around it. And Mike Hogan's very good at this, allocating a small amount of capital to try to get back a big return. But there are other betting philosophies where, and really in any philosophy, but especially a player who's a little bit more aggressive, the idea of preserving capital when you can. I almost feel like that idea of this 1-9, I really don't think he's going to lose. I can keep that $4 of my initial bankroll plus the extra couple of dimes I'm going to get. But that is something that is really the same at the end of the day as winning money. If you cannot lose your bankroll, if you cannot put bankroll at risk, if you can bet in a way where certain combinations come in where you're going to get your money back or a little more, what you don't lose is the same as what you win. Do you take that point, Mike, when it comes to cash betting?
Absolutely, and I think we have an opportunity to talk about that a little bit when you guys lump on me for my opinion in the Breeders' Cup Distaff and how I will likely approach that race from both a horizontal and a vertical standpoint.
Well, we'll put a pin in that. We will get there. Yeah. I want to talk a little more just because I noticed this contest, this interesting last online contest that DRF Tournaments is having on Sunday for the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge. I know, Jonathan, you're a ratio guy a lot of the time when it comes to tournaments. You would rather have a situation where you pay more and 1 in 20 entries get the goal than to pay less and 1 in 60 entries get the prize. Is that a correct assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like to pivot directly off of our comment, I feel like that ratio fits me better as someone who will take a 1-9 shot in a tournament versus a guy who will see a 1-9 in the sequence and just pick a bomb because they refuse to pick the 1-9. The bomb gets lucky and wins. And then now I have no shot because 27 guys who just blindly refuse to take a horse. You know what I mean? Like one of those. So I do better in the 1 in 11s versus the 1 in 30s. My style does better there.
And 1 in 11, not a random example. That's the ratio in Sunday's Breeders' Cup contest. It's got a limited number of seats. If you're listening to this show right now, if you're thinking about the Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge, I think about taking a shot. It ain't cheap. It's $1,000 to put up, but for a 1 in 11 chance for the BCBC, depending on what your current bankroll situation is, if you've got some money to spend, I think it's an excellent opportunity. And remember, this year you don't have to go to Santa Anita to play. I mean, obviously, I think that's the best way to do it, get a VIP trip to the Breeders' Cup, but you also have the opportunity to play from Aqueduct, to play from Gulfstream, to play from Churchill Downs, or even an online option that you can read more about at breederscup.com/BCBC. So if I were able to play, I would play in this one on Sunday for sure. And of course, you don't have to put up all that money. Today and tomorrow, there are feeders on DRF tournaments where you can win your way in. Will we see the name Jonathon Kinchen in any of those feeders?
Yeah, for sure. I played yesterday, and I guess they moved the post times yesterday. Did they move Belmont up or something?
To be honest, all I did yesterday was try to look at European horses for the Breeders' Cup. I didn't even turn on the racing.
I scrambled. I played in like the $100 one and then the $24 one, and I got all my picks in for the $100 one. I missed like 2 picks in the $24 one, and the $100 one I got 16th and 15th got something. So the saga continues, and then in the $24 one where you get an entry into the $100 one today, kind of like a feeder into a feeder. I got shut out and missed putting in my last 2 picks and the all-in, and one of them was a winner, which would have been the horse that got me into the top 20%.
That's gross.
Yeah,
what's
I know.
with you lately? But you
I
was
was
think
busy.
that was your fault? That was you think post times were moved up or something because of weather, maybe?
I thought they were moved up because someone texted me, "Hey, Belmont's early today," which I don't know what that means. I don't. So I was like, okay. So I scrambled and I got everything in except for like two or three of like the selections, and one of them was a winner, which would have made the difference. So that happens.
But you'll be back at it today and trying to get into that Sunday contest, it sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I feel like if you are planning on playing and buying in or whatever, like, I feel like you kind of have no choice.
What do you mean by that?
I just find it to be unbelievably ridiculous that you're going to spend $10,000 in 10 days and you can spend 24 today, 24 tomorrow, and at an opportunity, or 24 today, or 100 tomorrow, or 100 today, at an opportunity to win 1,000, to then win 10,000 on races you're going to be likely to be playing anyways. Like, I just feel like it's silly not to. So I mean, I have no choice but to do it.
if you've got the bandwidth, which I don't know that I would, I might just try directly into Sunday. But yeah, it's cool not only to have these feeders, but basically what I would call a super feeder, a chance for $24 to get the 110 to get into this $1,000 contest on Sunday. I think it's going to sell out. I'd love to see the names of some podcast listeners on those qualifiers after the races are done on Sunday. I did notice one of the names that got in yesterday, Hurricane Anthony Robb, the crazy Australian who I had the pleasure of profiling a couple of weeks ago. He'll be playing in Sunday's qualifier. Why don't you get, you listeners out there, try to get along with Anthony and JK and whoever else is going to be playing. Why put up 10 when you can put up 1,000 and hopefully get the job done? So that's the headline. We also have an NHC qualifier on DRF tournaments on Saturday and a contest for Gulfstream on Sunday. Lots of feeders and credit builders. Check out tournaments.drf.com for all the latest tournaments news, as well as a list of the races that will be part of the contest. All right, so the real headline in racing for me over the last few days has been the publication of these early past performances. I absolutely love that for the Breeders' Cup, we get all this extra time to look through and dissect PPs. And we had a question come in that was an interesting question from Brad Heil. I'll dig for it, Mike, unless you have it in front of you. But it had to do with Breeders' Cup preparation. Oh, I have it right here. And he's a first-time using Formulator for the Breeders' Cup person, and he's looking for tips for using available time, specifically in Formulator, to get ahead of the Breeders' Cup handicapping. He talks about how he feels like he could use all the time between now and then to handicap just a few races. Any tricks for budgeting time, if you have only a couple of hours a day, an hour or two a day, to handicap for the Breeders' Cup. Mike Hogan, what would you tell Brad?
Well, first I would answer his question with a question, which is, what kind of handicapper are you? Are you a replay watcher? Are you a class handicapper? Are you a speed figure or pace? Or, primarily, where do you start and how do you dive in when you're handicapping a race not using Formulator? So based on that answer, then I would say, okay, just layer on top of that. If you're primarily a speed figure guy, start with that. Watch some races. If you have some questions, you can go to charts, you can go to replays, you can go to trainer stats, things like that. This additional information should not be overwhelming. It should just be simply additional. It should be extra beneficial information that supplements how you already do the work separately. That's kind of my speech about trying Formulator for the first time. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't get too distracted. If you don't watch replays, don't dive in and start watching replays. Just do it a little bit, layer on to things, and then go from there.
JK, why don't you take the question from the other angle, not so much about Formulator specifically, so much as about how you, as a handicapper, approach the Breeders' Cup when you have this, I'm going to call it a luxury, of having the PPs this many days in advance.
One of my favorite things to do, one of my favorite things to do, especially with this much time, is I try to watch every horse's last race. And I know that sounds like a lot, but if you think that every horse's last race is it's going to take you 2 minutes, and what is 150 pre-entered, you're looking at like 300 minutes. It's like 5 hours. You can somehow between now and when the final PPs actually draw, find 5 hours. And I think if you can take and watch every horse's last race, jot down a note or two about that horse, I think that's a great use of time leading into your preparation. And the great part about it is, if you watch one horse's last race, you're typically going to see another horse that's in the race's last race. Sometimes you'll get to see two horses. You know what I mean? And you'll be able to see some. Exactly. And I think that it's a good starting point for you. The other thing that I like to do is, if I have the time, is I like to go to the DRF search bar and type in the horse's name and try to read at least one article or blast through one article and try to find a quote from a trainer in there about the horse. Because there's a lot of horses where you'll find out where, like for instance, if I'm sure we're going to try to talk about some of these races, but like in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf, there's a horse in there named Well Abled. And I just realized
isn't it pronounced Well-Abled? I heard that on a podcast.
I think I said Well-Abled.
Well-Abled, yes.
Yeah, I thought it was a Lasix thing. Anyway.
Right. He's running in the Alcibiades, I think.
Yes.
But a horse like that, I want to know if and when Larry Ravelli decided that this was the spot he wanted to run this horse. Has he always felt like the horse will stretch out? Is there a quote where he thinks, where he ran going 7 and he has a quote where he says, "Oh, I'm a little bit concerned about the distance"? I want to know if they said anything like that, because if he was concerned about the distance of him going 7, then I can just go ahead and tag this as a owner picked the spot. They're trying to stretch the horse out. He's got no shot. You know what I mean? And so I think if you can find stuff like that throughout the time, that's what I would use this extra time for. I wouldn't in-depth handicap every horse yet, because there's so many changes that are going to happen. There's so many pace scenarios that I feel like you'll be looking at the races incorrectly, not knowing who's going to actually be in the field.
Yeah, and that's
I got a perfect example. You said Well-Abled. Well, I got one for you. American Gal. I don't know if you guys have looked at the juvenile fillies deeply yet, but American Gal for Bob Baffert.
But just so you know, Mike, you're twisting the scissors, because that is the horse that I was supposed to use on Sunday.
Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No. I'm sorry. Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, like you said, on Sunday, just last Sunday, ran and won the 6 furlong stakes race. Now, less than a week later, they enter her for a race that's less than 2 weeks after her last win. I want to know, was the plan always to run back within 2 weeks and stretch out to the longest distance ever? Or is this she did so well there that we'll try her in the Breeders' Cup? Those are the kinds of questions that I look for.
Do you know the answer to that one, Mike?
I just did a search, and immediately after the win, I guess she had some sort of illness where she lost some training time, which is why there was the gap between the maiden win and the race on Sunday. And Baffert said right after the race, we can go farther than that. We have a couple of options. We can go crazy or just wait. We'll see how the foot is. Oh, I guess it was not just an illness. It was a foot issue. She lost a shoe in Sunday's. I guess that's the deal. She lost a shoe winning Sunday's race. They were going to check and see how her foot was. Other than that, she was smooth. Blah, 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 blah. So it sounds like right after the race, they weren't sure. And then shortly after, they decided, all right, let's give this a shot. But you're right. I mean, this could very well be Kaleem Shah said, wow, she was great. Bob, please send her. And Bob's like, okay, I got a couple others, but we'll give it a shot.
That's an angle we talk about on the pod, but haven't really done in a while for newer listeners. The idea of And it's I think it's a negative, but sometimes it works out anyway. The idea, if you can ascertain when an owner picked the spot as opposed to the trainer, that's typically something you can bet against. I think is fair to say. I just want to add my 2 cents to Brad's question about prep time. For me, we're so familiar with the USA-based horses, but so many of these races, especially the turf races, go through, really entirely the turf races, tend to you need to have a handle on the European form to be able to handicap them properly, in my opinion. So I spend a lot of time digging through other past performance sources and videos and just trying to get a handle on European horses. And I feel like, for me, that's the most efficient use of my time. And to get back to what Mike said, you sort of have to tailor your time to what you're good at. And if you're worried that you don't have enough time, I would, for the way that you handicap, if you're like a real labor-intensive person, I would just cut down the amount of work. I would go through, I would look at however many races you feel like you're going to have time for, pick that number of places where, go with the idea that your first thought is your best thought in terms of finding a spot where you're going to be successful, and just spend the time you have to on those races. So hopefully that's helpful advice.
Absolutely.
The other thing that you can do, which I've done in the past when there's big racing days, is I set milestones throughout the week for myself of where I expect to be. So, if like, just for instance, I'm not going to do that this year. I don't think I'm going to have the time to really do it. But I think what I would do is I would try to have Friday's 4 races completely 100% job done handicapping, like come Wednesday. And then Thursday, or maybe Tuesday, and then Wednesday and Thursday, I would spend those 2 days handicapping Saturday. And then Friday morning, I would dedicate that morning to refining those 4 races for Friday. And then on Saturday morning, I would spend the time refining that last minute information for the races on Saturday. And I think if you can kind of set yourself some goals like that, that's another thing that could be beneficial.
It's a good idea. And you could break it down even further. These 2 races are going to be done by this time, etc. You could make it like a real work production schedule almost, and reevaluate based on how much you can get done. But I think sounds to me like we're all in agreement that you kind of can't prepare enough for a challenge like this. It's the more you prepare, the better off you're going to be.
The other thing I do is I guess I call it kind of a helicopter approach, where I quickly go through, like now or even yesterday, or when the PPs came out, I will go through all races quickly just to get an overview and a sense, and who I think I like and who I think is vulnerable. And then I'll kind of circle back 3 or 4 different times, diving deeper each time. So then that way, when I get to, or I eventually run out of time, I won't feel like there's a certain race I haven't covered at all, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's very sensible to me. We had another question that was actually for the previous show, but I put a pin in it because we didn't have JK, and it seemed like one more for him. Our friend of the podcast, Jim Timmick, wanted to ask questions about specifically what's been going on at Santa Anita in terms of this new turf course. That was his first question. He was curious to know how it's been playing, how average times seem to relate to times in the past. Do you have that information at the tip of your brain, JK?
I don't. I usually depend on the experts when it comes to that. And what I mean by that is the speed figures. It does. I don't really care what, like we've talked about before on the show. I don't care about final time. I don't look at final time. I'm not concerned with final time, because I trust the figure makers that I use. Whatever figure you use, if you're using a figure, you're supposed to trust them as well. I just allow the number to tell me, the figure will tell me if the track is playing fast, because they're not going to give, if the track is playing fast at Santa Anita, right? They're not going to give a 32 claimer on the turf. They're not going to give him a 115 buyer. You know what I mean? So they're gonna adjust that buyer based on the class of the race and so on and so forth. And those figures should make an adjustment to how the new track is playing. So the only thing that I've noticed about Santa Anita is that you want to, not that it was ever anything different than this anyways, but you want to be forward. You want to be forward on that turf course. And I would think that when I'm reading those articles about turf horses, I'm going to look for one word in particular. And when I see those words, I'm going to put a little mark next to those horses, which is turn of foot, quicken, burst of speed, accelerate. Those are the words. I want horses that will be in position and can really, really quicken. And those are the horses I'm going to be looking for at Santa Anita on that turf course. These stamina types, the long run types, those are the ones that I don't think are going to be suited by the turf course there.
A couple other quick Santa Anita specific questions I think everybody'd love to hear your responses to. And Mike, you chime in on this one too. He suggested a couple of years back there was a big speed bias for both days on the dirt. I don't know that my information corroborates that, but his question about it was a speed bias on a Breeders' Cup Day on the dirt something that would be an accident or perhaps premeditated? JK, you start with that.
I think that the track guy at Santa Anita is one of the best. When we find biases, they're only there for a day and then they're gone. I think he pays attention to that type of stuff and tries to get it fixed. To me, I think that certain things happen in races on Breeders' Cup Day, and everyone is so familiar with all the horses that they go ahead and assume that there's an inside bias. Like, last year with Take Charge Brandy when she won. I mean, the world just exploded.
That was the day he was talking about, actually. That was 2 years ago. Santa Anita.
Right.
Given out by Mike Hogan, that horse.
Yeah, but I don't have it in front of me, but I'm not sure. Did another horse really even win on the rail after that, or wire to wire?
There were other wire horses that day, but the pace figures, the data that I saw suggested that was way more fair than the world was suggesting after the Take Charge Brandy.
Here's what I'll say, and I'm not even an expert at bias. I would call the expert at bias that I know would be Duke Matisse, and Duke will tell you. And he's been doing it every day, watched more races than anyone I can probably imagine, and done bias work more than anyone I've ever imagined. He'll tell you it's dangerous to try to identify bias on the day. And I would say that it's even more dangerous to try to identify the bias on the day when it's Breeders' Cup Day. My opinion to you is be aware of it, and pay attention to it. But I would focus more on the horses themselves and the pace situations themselves than trying to identify if the inside or the outside is good at Santa Anita on Breeders' Cup Day. The thing about it is that, speed is always good at California. It just is. The track's not as deep as it is at, say, Belmont. So speed is always going to do a little bit better there. And I think some people that don't watch California racing as much, when they're running in a two-turn race and they see 22-4 or 23-1, they think, oh my God, they're flying. But at Santa Anita, like 23-1, like claimers go 23-1 and keep going. Like it's not what people think it is. I think sometimes the clock can throw them off a little bit. I'm not going to spend a lot of time identifying during the day whether there's a bias or not. I'm going to focus on horses that I think present value regardless of the track surface and hope that I can be right a couple of times.
I don't think JK left much, if any, meat left on that bone, Mike. But did you have anything to add?
I would tend to agree. I mean, I think that a lot of times bias, quote unquote, biases are from horse players, especially knee-jerk reactions to biases like Take Charge Brandy, for instance, who I think eventually ended up validating that win and showed that it wasn't just a fluke. She was probably, if not the best 2-year-old filly in that field, certainly one of them. So you have to take a little time to figure out whether or not there really is a bias. And I think a lot of times it's a knee-jerk reaction to certain horse players where they say, I didn't have that horse, so there must be some sort of other explanation for it. When often the most simple explanation is the right one. Speed is generally, not just in dirt races, not just at Santa Anita, but in general, in North American races especially, speed is an asset that you don't want to underestimate. You make your own trip when you're on the lead. There's a lot of different benefits you can get from being on the lead. So don't immediately think speed bias if a horse you didn't have ends up wiring a field.
Last Santa Anita question for both of you guys. Any post position biases, not really biases, but just post position configuration things that players who aren't regular SoCal players should be aware of? Mike, does anything come to mind for you?
Well, I wouldn't say bias, but I think down the hill in the turf sprint, definitely the inside posts, especially these huge fields, are negatives. I wouldn't say a horse can't win from the rail or from the two post, but I definitely downgrade them a little bit. I wouldn't want to toss a long shot that I thought was live, but it makes me a little less excited about betting one if they draw the rail.
And I know, Jonathan, you're a believer that the inside isn't where you want to be on those turf sprints, especially with the big fields. But any other post-position biases that you worry about, particularly at Santa Anita? How is it being all the way outside on the dirt for these juveniles? What do you think about that one specifically?
It's not the longest run to the first turn. I mean, I think just like anywhere in America, drawing the 14 is not ideal. But I will say that I'm sorry, 2 turns, yeah. But I think one of the things that I've heard a lot is that, drawing outside 12, 13, 14 or whatever on the turf races and the 1 mile and the mile turf races can be dangerous. And that is true, but I think that people have to realize is that when the rail is down at Santa Anita, which it will be for the Breeders' Cup races, it's not as bad as you would think it is. Now, you don't want a horse who's got no real speed, because then the horse is not going to be able to get into a good position from out there. But if you like a horse in the 14, I wouldn't toss him, because I think Caraconte won from the 14 post at a bomb. Hit at a bomb last year at Keeneland won from the 14 post, and I think that was the only reason that horse was 8-1. Look, if you love something that draws outside, I wouldn't just toss or get off because of that.
I think that's a great point. That it's one of those things where, it probably matters, but the crowd probably thinks it matters more than it actually matters. Right. No better example of that than Hit at a Bomb, who probably should have been half that price, going off at the overlaid 8-1. But
here's how. Sorry, Pete. No, here's how I look at it. It's very simple. You can get disadvantageous trips from any post position that there is, right? And the odds of it happening are the same. If you draw the 14, there's a 50% chance that you're going to get hung out wide. If you draw the 5, there's a 50% chance that you're going to get shut off by the 6, shut off by the 4, pinched by the 4, miss the break, stumble at the start. There's so many things that could go wrong that, to me, they all equal out at the end of the day. And so I try not to let that influence my decisions too much. I just try to get on live horses that have good connections, that are fit, that are talented, and will be finishing when I need them to be finishing.
The only thing I'll dispute in that is I do think you are a little bit more likely, especially depending on your running style, to have trouble from certain posts. But it's not the difference between use and toss. It's the difference between, maybe I'd want a little more fat in the odds of this horse who's going to be, you don't want the third best speed horse coming from the outside necessarily. You know what I mean?
I don't want the third best speed horse. Period.
Anyway, that's a good point.
You're right. I see what you're saying.
But no, we'll talk more about that when we have actual horses to talk about. One more question that's been in the queue for at least a week that I wanted to get to, and then we'll do some just quick fire thoughts on these pre-entries. Before we do that, let me answer. I'll do this question first, which was somebody was asking about something we talk about on the show from time to time, the best horse angle. Like, what does that mean? How do you identify? And I just use that. That's kind of my cheeky term when there's a horse that I really like, but on paper, it's just kind of obvious to me and everybody else that this horse is a very likely winner, and so much so that rather than try to pass the race or get cute and try to beat them, I'll maybe try to find a way to use them either alone in horizontals or on top in verticals, just because they're just such a standout on typically just fundamentals of handicapping. For me, for a horse to use the best horse angle, it's probably the horse with the best figures, it's probably the horse with the best form, and they certainly aren't at any kind of pace disadvantage. So I use that. It's almost just kind of like a joke when it's not a very clever pick. The old best horse angle could come up in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic, I think.
It's interesting. It's funny you say that, because I often think of the best horse angle differently, where I'll think, you look at the field, Run Happy in the ACAC, for instance. You look at that field and you say, Who's the best horse? It's clear, obviously. Run Happy, hands down, the best horse. Is he the most likely winner in this scenario is a different question that I approach. So it's funny you say it that way, because I often will, it's like American Pharoah and the Travers. No one, even our buddy Elliot Honecker, Keen Ice supporter, part owner, wouldn't admit that Keen Ice is better than American Pharoah. American Pharoah is clearly the best horse. That doesn't necessarily mean that the best horse will win.
Well, I think Pete's point is that what he's saying, and this is kind of how I feel about it, is yes, best horse in the field, and I'm going to default to the best horse because I cannot come up with a clever idea to suggest how one of these other horses are going to win. When it comes to Run Happy, I can make a list on loose leaf paper that could be front and back of all the reasons why Run Happy could not win that day.
Right.
I couldn't really do that when it came to, say, Classic Empire in the race at Keeneland. So, so
that's fair. That's fair.
That's an interesting example, Classic Empire, because he did have some superficial reasons not to like, but in the end, he was the best horse, and he proved it on the track that day. Anybody have anything else on that? Or I want to very quickly touch on this week's public handicapper races. Normally, the public handicapper races are the focus of our Friday show. Obviously, with Breeders' Cup pre-entries in hand, I'm not going to be looking at them this week. But I think Mike Hogan did, and I thought maybe, Mike, do you have anything to share with folks, or if not tips in the races, some things to be looking for in them?
I do. We'll be running out of time a little bit, but there's a couple races, particularly the ones at Belmont, are interesting. The sixth is the Awad. Is that how you say it?
Yeah, sure. Tough little turf horse in the mid-90s.
For 2-year-old. Exactly, David Donk. Was he? He wasn't a New York bred, was he?
I don't remember that. I don't think so.
Okay. Well, anyway. Okay. Regardless, it's a 2-year-old turf route stakes race. It's a listed stakes race, but there's a lot of interesting runners in here, and you'll get a sense because some of them faced horses that will be showing up in the juvenile turf, at least, of course, the American ones. So take a look at it if you weren't thinking about it, because even if you're focused on Breeders' Cup, there's some implications from this race that may affect how you handicap later on. That said, there's kind of a basics of handicapping approach. There's a horse in here I love, and I see the morning line. He's made 5-1, which is the fourth choice on the morning line. I don't know if we're going to get that, but boy, I sure hope so. If he's the fourth choice in any sort of horizontal wagers, oh my God. It's Harlan's Harmony for John Terranova. Won first 2 starts at Belmont and then Saratoga, sprinting, stretched out to a mile at Woodbine in the summer last out, set the pace early, dueling with a 60-1 horse before tiring. This is where, and even still, he got the top buyer in the field. So he's coming into the field with the top buyer. From a handicapping standpoint, he is, according to the buyer, the fastest horse in the race. He's a half to tourist. He should absolutely stretch out. So if you look at his PPs, you think, he won 2 races sprinting, then tired at a mile. I don't know about it. Well, he's half to tourist, so I think he can get the distance. And then here's how I use Formulator. I'm not even going to talk about the other races because I wanted to talk enough about Harman's Harmony, and we've got other things to cover. But if you click on John Terranova in Formulator, this is how I layer on the trainer stats. And with a horse that I already like, and I have questions about the distance and I have questions about other things, Terranova keeps him in a turf stakes race, keeps him going a mile, okay? Click on Terranova, and I just do first route because I want to see how he does with all horses trying a route for the first time. Terranova's only 4 for 71, okay? And then you add in turf. First time going a route on turf, he's 1 for 42, okay? So this horse had absolutely, from a trainer standpoint, license to tire. This is not the kind of thing Terranova always does with his runners. You could do first route with 2-year-olds, he's 0 for 26. So that's where I think, okay, I'll give this horse a pass in his last race. But even remember, his last race, he got the top buyer in the field. Now you do the same thing, and you do second route with all runners. Terranova is, and I'm doing it right now as we speak, so you got to hold on. He's 9 for 56, 16%. He went from 4% with turf route, first route, just in general, 4% to 16% second time routing, 282 ROI. So obviously he improves. A lot more of them hit the board. You add in second route on the turf, he's 6 for 33, 18%, 329 ROI. One at 23 to 1. He had another one just miss at 10 to 1. This is a horse who I think will run well. Before the morning lines came out, I thought, okay, he's going to be the 5 to 2 favorite on the morning line, and maybe he's 7 to 5 in the real betting. But no, because you've got Chad Brown in here, you've got Todd Pletcher in here, you've got some other horses that are going to take some money, Christophe Clement. You might actually get that 5 to 1. So
what's the name of this beast again for folks to follow along?
He is the 5-horse Harlan's Harmony.
All right, definitely one to pay attention to. We say it all the time. Trainers are creatures of habit too, just like horses.
Yeah.
And if that's something he does, give him the first route and then come back a lot tighter the second one. People see the dirtied up form line, so that ROI goes way up, the win percentage goes up. I think that's a great formulator example. Hopefully the horse runs well, Mike, and we can use that as an example in a future webinar. What do you think?
Let's hope so.
Excellent. All right, we got about 15 minutes left on the show today. We'll point out before we talk pre-entries real quick here that it is the final weekend of the Public Handicapper Challenge next weekend with the Breeders' Cup races. Going to be fun to watch that go down to the wire. Maybe I'll try to write a little preview piece this week. Certainly we'll try to get an interview, if not with the overall winner, the overall highest finishers who are smart enough to sign up for the NHC Tour and win their National Handicapping Championship seats for absolutely free. But, all right, now I haven't done what I would call not even a lick of real handicapping of the pre-entries. But I was just curious to pick your guys' brains for a few minutes about anything that stood out. If flipping through these PPs, there was any particular place where you felt like you wanted to get stuck into or had a particularly strong opinion. JK, we'll start with you.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much time we have. I think we should just run through the races, talk about one horse that we're interested in with like a couple of sentences, and we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. I'm going to start with the Breeders' Cup Juvenile Turf. I'm interested in Ticonderoga. I heard Chad say if they can get the issue sorted out with the horse lugging in, that they're going to show up to this race. I'm going to look at workout reports and hope that they made an equipment change to fix the lugging in, because I thought that horse was going to win that race for fun. Whatever figure he got should improve. You're going to get Chad in California, which is always a good thing. He seems to do well on that turf course. I'm interested in Ticonderoga if that horse actually shows up.
Excellent. I don't think we have time, JK, to go through every race. Is there one or two others you wanna highlight?
Yeah, because remember, guys,
next week,
we'll be doing 3 podcasts next week.
Yeah, and I just don't have. I don't have time. I didn't have time to have an intelligent thought about every race. But I could give one or two. But why don't we keep it with you and pick a couple other things that stand out to you for folks from this early out.
Yeah, I guess I was thinking I wasn't going to need much time for to carve up Mike on his Songbird thing.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I know. Okay. I really want obviously Down the Hill, and I'm really interested in Ohm Down the Hill. Those are some horses that I could potentially build a day around. And I guess the last I'm going to be against Syndergaard in the juvenile. Syndergaard and Practical Joke. I think both of those horses will take money. I'm going to build a lot of what I do around Classic Empire, Gormley, and Not This Time. So those are kind of my main big thoughts, just to kind of get people rolling into the weekend with things to look at.
I'll give one thought of just a thing that surprised me looking through the pre-entries. I think Lady Eli might have her hands full. Both Queen's
that's a wide open race.
Yeah, both Queen's Trust and Seventh Heaven in particular to me. Yeah, I don't know how open I see it as. I think it goes through those two. I think Seventh Heaven and Queen's Trust have really good form. I think setup wise, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, a lot more work needs to be done. But from here, I'm not saying she's not a contender, but I was kind of thinking that could be a spot to get some real value. And yeah, so that's one that I'll mention from this far out. Of course, we'll be giving thoughts on every single one of these races. We're going to go through all the Euros on Tuesday, hopefully with Nick Luck and Kevin Blake. And then we've got a DRF Players podcast Wednesday with special guest Matt Bernier. And then the three of us will be guests on the Matt Bernier show on Thursday, doing the back half of the Breeders' Cup races. And we're going to try to make it where that show still appears in our regular podcast stream, so nobody misses out on it. Should be a lot of fun. Mike, when you're looking over these races, where are you anticipating you're going to be putting most of your action?
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's most of my action in terms of total amount of dollars wagered, but I certainly know strongest opinion, and you guys know where I'm going here. I think the most vulnerable favorite on either day is in the Distaff.
All right, let's talk about the Distaff. So this is sad, folks. I had to mute Mike Hogan yesterday. Here I am. I'm trying to work. I'm looking at tape. I'm trying to focus on these European horses. I'm looking for biases at Newmarket. I'm comparing formulas. It seemed like every 15 minutes, Mike just wanted to talk about Songbird. Now, to be fair,
no.
I brought it up. But
yes.
I brought it up
yes.
because I thought your email had been hacked, or some vicious Twitter troll had decided to get the best of you and was spreading a nasty rumor that you had Songbird as a 12-1 shot in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. And so I just thought that was wrong. Once I knew that it was not in fact wrong, in my head it was just like, okay, let's talk about it on the show. But I felt like you were like a dog with a bone. You just kept texting and I eventually said something mean, and then I was like, I don't want to be mean to Mike. I'm muting this conversation.
Well, yeah, because you used phrases like "worst opinion I've ever heard," to which I replied, "You need to get out more."
Oh, exactly, especially this election season. Yeah, you're absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
I walked that back right away. To be fair, but yeah.
Yes, you also used words like moronic and don't open a book anytime soon. And I think you said something about don't be surprised if the men with white coats knock on your door soon. So there was reason why I was texting.
I regret moronic. I regret moronic. I'll stand by everything else.
You were egging me on. So anyway, I'll explain it. Look, I don't. From a racing fan standpoint, I am absolutely rooting for Songbird. I love this filly, okay? She is a brilliant filly. She is by far the best 3-year-old filly I've seen this year. She might be the best 3-year-old filly we've seen in a long time. And I, in the cotillion, I mean, I think I tweeted out an $18 pick 4 play that hit for $1 where I singled her, went through her. I've loved her in all of her other races.
We don't need you to tell us, Mike. We don't need you to tell us why Songbird is good. We need you to tell us why she has an 8% chance to win the distance.
Well, but see, I want to say this because I don't want people to think that I'm always knocking this horse or I'm just, whatever. I'm one of her detractors, okay? So I love her, and I hope she wins because I think we need a superstar. But this is a very, 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 very tough year of older fillies. This is not last year. Wedding Toast is not your favorite. Okay, you don't have Stop Charging Maria as the winner. You've got the second and third place finishers who were 3-year-olds last year coming back, and they're better this year than they were last year. Plus, you've got Beholder, who is, at least from the buyer speed figures, and we talked about it on the show, has not lost a step. Plus, you've got other, the more outsider horses. Forever Unbridled is coming into form well for the race. You've got I'm a Chatterbox, who's better than she was last year. This is a tough field of older fillies, okay? So if you're taking even money or whatever she's going to be on a filly to beat this field, to wire this field, stepping up against older for the first time, sure, she's trounced her division, but this division, remember, has not flattered her at all.
How flattered do you need to be when you win by 5 every time under a double handful?
Well, that's the point. I mean, if let's not talk about Songbird, let's not talk about Champion, let's not talk about Cotillion and Alabama and all these races. If we were talking about a listed stakes winner at Parks stepping up to face a tough older division with horses that had better speed figures, that had better proven form against open and
what
against.
What are we talking about? Parks? You lost me here. What?
I'm trying. Just listen to my analogy, man.
I'm trying, but it's not resonating. Try again.
Well, what I'm saying is she trounced okay, I used listed, state bred, whatever you want to call it, restricted to her division. We know she's by far the best 3-year-old. If Karina Mia goes in there, I know she's so much better than Karina Mia. What I don't know is she good enough to test herself against the best of the older fillies? And this is not a light year in terms of the older fillies. Stellar Wind might be one of the better older fillies we've seen in a long time. Beholder's in there. This is a very, very tough race. I see Stellar Wind and Beholder as by far, between the two of them, more than 50% likely that your winner is going to come from one of those two. If it's not one of those two, it's almost throw up the next 4 contenders between Songbird, I'm a Chatterbox, Carolina, and Forever Unbridled. Any
Jonathan,
one of those,
Jonathan,
in my opinion,
let's hear from Jonathan for a second. Jonathan, you've been on the record for a month about wanting to oppose Songbird in this spot. When you hear Mike saying this stuff, what are your thoughts?
I mean, so all right. I like Mike a lot, so I'm picking my words carefully. I mean, this is kind of one of those examples we talked about earlier with the sky being green thing, where it's like I don't know how to argue with someone when they think the sky is green. The idea that, look, I'm going to try to beat her, and I have no problem with Mike wanting to beat her, with Mike wanting to spend 8% of his money on her winning, with Mike thinking that she's only worth this much money, but all those things are all fine to me. But the pure idea that if they run this race 100 times and she only wins 8 of them is beyond bizarre to me. And essentially what Mike is saying is that her chances of winning equal the chances of an 11-to-1 shot. All right. And if you look, just grab, I don't care what PPs you grab a stack of PPs from yesterday, from 2 weeks ago, and just start flipping through them and look at 11-to-1 shots. And then look at those horses and tell me if you see any horse that even almost looks like Songbird. It's just the fact that it makes no sense to me that she has an 8% chance of winning. I'm fine with being against her, but 8% chance of winning is bizarre to me. She's going to be loose on the lead. She's an undefeated 2-year-old champion. She's going to be a 3-year-old champion. She's won, I don't know how many grade 1s because I've lost count, a heck of a lot of them. No one's ever been close to her. She's never really even been asked. And the idea that she's only going to win 8% of the time is bizarre. I mean, if you wanted to say she's going to win 15% of the time, 16% of the time, 20% of the time, whatever it is,
20 would be the lowest amount I think I could accept, even if somebody hated her. Even with the points Mike's making.
Right. You guys. I'll just say you guys are distracted by the ones. Okay.
No way,
right?
Mike. That's ridiculous.
Well,
yesterday, I want this one, JK. But if you got it, go ahead.
Distracted by the ones. The ones kind of matter.
The ones do matter. The ones don't matter really to me with Songbird, though. Even though I agree that winning does mean something, but it's not Songbird's name, like Mike suggested yesterday in one of the texts that threw me over the edge and made me mean. It's not the ones. It's the tape.
Well,
it's the tape.
Sure,
Watch the
that's
tape.
Fine.
That's fine. You're right. These 3-year-olds have not. The performance of the rest of the 3-year-olds isn't the reason to like her. You'd like her all the more if Karina Mia had stepped up and run well against elders. That's true. But when you win under the wire, I mean, I wish I could. If it was a webinar, I'd share my PPs. And on 4 of the last 6 races, double handful. I'll send it later.
Sure.
2H, that's the mark for double handful, wasn't asked. 2H on 4 of the 6. I thought the cotillion figure could have been higher. I mean, I think a lot of the people who are I haven't heard anybody take it quite as extreme as you, Mike, but I think there are plenty of people who think she's going to be an underlay. And frankly, I mean, and this is where this argument falls down. I wish this would be a better hour of radio if I could sit here and say Songbird won't lose. The fact is, I think she's going to win this race 40% of the time, maybe a little more, and she's still going to be an underlay because of the excellent points you made up top about the depth of the field. But if you want to use a value line as a tool, I don't know that. I don't know that that's going to, you obviously come up with some great opinions. You're going to have great prices on the show. I'm not sure that the value line is going to be your friend if you come up with a book or come up with a list that has Songbird at 12 to 1. I mean, how much, let's cut it in half at 6 to 1, Mike. How much can I bet?
I'm not trying to make a book, man. I'm just trying to figure out my own opinions and how I'm playing the races. And we talked a little bit about it earlier, and I'll use this as an example. What I'll likely do in approaching these races is maybe play pick fours where I use Stellar Wind as an A, Beholder as a B, and then Carolina, I'm a Chatterbox, Forever Unbridled as C's, and toss Songbird completely. Not because I don't think she can win,
underlay,
but because she's a complete underlay. Okay,
so I have no problem with that argument.
Okay, but listen, yeah. So, and if she beats me, if she beats all of these older fillies, then she may be one of the greatest ever. But I really do think in order to beat all of these, she will have to be one of the greatest ever, because this is a very, very, very tough field. And so that's how I'll be playing it. If I'm alive to Stellar Wind as an A, however many times I have that, Beholder as a B, however many times, and then defensively to the other three. If I have Songbird uncovered, then I will be defensively hedging by using her on top in tries and supers, just to try and get my money back, because I'm expecting, if I'm alive in the pick four, to be alive to $2,000 to $3,000, depending upon how the other races go and my opinions and everything. And of course, we'll have Songbird uncovered. Maybe the equivalent would be $100 or $200 or $300.
All right, we are just about out of time, Mike. If you want to wrap up that thought.
Anyway, yeah. So that's all I'm saying is, that's how I will be betting the race. That's why I would be tossing her. And then that's how I will be, like you said, Pete, money saved is money earned. That's how I will be saving my money with Songbird on top.
All right. I will say this. If you're going to use a value line as a tool and somebody offers you half the posted price and you're not going to take it, I just don't know how valuable a value line is. That's my final point on the matter. I'll let you rebut that in a sentence, and then we got to get out of here.
That's fine. Look, my value line is my own personal line. It's not a book that I'm trying to take on all comers. But
and of course, I was talking about betting jelly beans there, nothing else. We're not violating any rules on this show. Twitter avatars and jelly beans only. Oh, I know we said we were done, but you guys had a bet the last time we were all on the show. What happened with that?
I won.
But you don't sound proud of it. Was it another pillow fight?
No, I'm always proud of it.
His 4-to-1 shot held on for a length over my 46-to-1 longest shot in the field. He finished fourth. I finished fifth.
Ooh.
I don't know.
If we were scoring that on points, we might have to give that one to Hogan. 4-to-1 versus 46? Come on.
Yeah.
All right, that's it. I want to thank Jonathon Kinchen. I want to thank Mike Hogan. I want to thank all of you for listening. We're going to be back next week with an array of shows. Check out drf.com for the full list. We've got podcasts. We've got webinars. We want you to be a part of all of it. Going to be great Breeders' Cup coverage. Go back to drf.com like 8 to 10 times a day between now and the Breeders' Cup. You're going to be finding a lot of super valuable information there. If you're playing this weekend, may you win all your photos. Your photos. Your photos. Your photos. Your photos. Your photos. Your photos.